Hello, everyone. Welcome to Not Your Average Goat. This is a show that celebrates all the shapes, sizes, and colors of diversity as well as adversity, while creating a space for authentic and vulnerable conversations that hopefully you find to be meaningful and relatable. Through these conversations, my guests and I hope to have an impact on dismantling deeply ingrained stigma and prejudice.
I was sitting in my room. It had been about 2 months since I had been to my last college course, basically failing all of my classes. The only time I would get out of bed was to take a shower and eat, maybe go on the occasional walk outside just to stay, active. But I remember my friend called me. His name is Michael Davis. I love him to death because he did the right thing. And I always joke with him. I say, thank you for telling on me. Thank you for tattling. We always say no one likes a tattletale. I love that my friend was a tattletale because he was able to understand the way that I was responding to him. And this was just through text. I think he got a sense and was able to read beneath the underneath with my responses and just realize these are not good. These are not good comments. There's, the overarching theme is depression, anguish, self-loathing, probably not in a good state of mind. And he just got this overwhelming sense of doom. And he felt that if he didn't tell my mom to call me and check in on me, that something might happen to me, that I might do something to myself that I could not take back. And to him, I say thank you. If he ever does listen to any of these episodes that I thanked him on, I hope he does know how much I thank him, because I do truly believe on that day he saved my life. Because after he told my mom, like, hey, you need to call Chad. I'm telling you right now that there's something wrong with him and it's bad. And if we don't get him help, he might do something to himself. So my mom calls me. She asks me what's going on. She says, how are you doing, baby? And I'm like, I'm not good. She's like, what's the matter? And I told her, I'm not going to any of my classes. I don't feel like I have any self-worth. I really was just in a bad place. So as I'm talking to my mom, I just tell her, I really don't want to live anymore. And she did the right thing. She did what a mom should do. She came, she got me out of my courses early, and then I took the next year off getting counseling, getting psychiatric help. And, obviously I know it's not right for everybody. Psychology and psychiatry, not a lot of people believe in it. Some don't think it's right. But for me, it's really what helped me. I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of therapy. I was eventually able to, get myself back together. That was a really dark time in my life, but I think it's an important part of my journey, because especially when people see me nowadays and they're like, oh my goodness, you're so happy, you're so proud of your disability. And then I just tell them, I was like, yeah, but that's how this is kind of like the end goal. But how I had to get there is I had to struggle. I had to go through a lot of depression, anguish, and I even thought that at one point that my life was worthless to the point where I should just end it. So it's just like, yeah.
I think representation, when it comes to our disabilities specifically, is so important, because we don't, bad choice of words, but I'm going to say we don't see ourselves on TV, but we are not on TV. There are not people like us on TV. There are not people like us in the media, really. I'm just now starting to see a lot of blind and disabled folks really try to become like voices on social media, which I think is fantastic. When I was growing up, there weren't really any programs for me to participate in to see kind of what life could look like for me as an adult. And I'm so thankful that, at least for me, I had people in my life who valued education. So I valued it. And I was always very disciplined, a big nerd, just like yourself. Even though I struggled, I think, as, a teenage girl struggling with certain things and not feeling accepted, I also am an introvert and very reserved. So most of the times I was okay not being part of, the cliques and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is so important having that representation. And I'm actually a volunteer mentor for the National Federation of the Blind Virginia chapter.
Love
And
NFB.
yeah, and I work with high school and college students, and I help them with things like learning how to advocate for yourself, how to be independent, what employment opportunities are available to you, how to be resilient. And I think that that program is so important because they get to see me and other successful blind people who have stable jobs, who have gone to college, although you don't have to go to college today.
Especially today.
Yeah, if you can try to find an alternative that's much cheaper. But, that can go to college and be successful, can find a really great paying, high paying job, can build families, can live on your own. And so I love that I get to be a part of that and part of that movement to help younger blind people see that there is more to hopefully help prevent others from, going through a similar situation that you went through and just being depressed and turned inward so much that you consider taking your life might be better than, continuing to live, because that
Mm-hmm.
is so painful to think about. And I really hope that others out there can find something to help them move forward and, get out of their mental health. I definitely agree that I think therapists, psychiatrists are a really, really great avenue to take. I'm in therapy, not necessarily for my visual impairment, for other, personal things, but
Mm-hmm.
therapy is amazing.
Yeah.
You have someone who's completely unbiased, who's their job is to help you grow. But I do see, through some of these other like Facebook groups, I see people that, either because of geo isolation, because they've never been introduced to resources, they are kind of in the situation where they're kind of depressed, or, maybe they're just, living on their couch, not doing anything. And it's hard sometimes to know what to say to folks other
Mm-hmm.
than, hey, there's there's other things out there in life. Like there are opportunities for you to do something else with your life. But I also think some people just feel so like defeated
Yeah.
and overwhelmed, not sure in what direction to go in. So I say to anyone who might be listening, who might be in one of those situations, that there are options. I think trying to network and find other visual impaired or blind people who have taken different courses in life and talking to them and learning for them. I think if we can all just be a very big supportive community and help each other out. But I also think equally that people need to be willing to actually take the steps for themselves and be accountable to themselves as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you brought up a good point. I think maybe the issue with me was that I just didn't see representation of someone that was like myself, who was more authentic to me. And all the representation that I saw were the cliche, all American boys, or the bad boys, or the jocks, the popular people. No one really looked like me. No one really felt like me. No one was to a level of authenticity to me. And I think maybe that was what caused a lot of my internal strife. I just felt like there was no one like me in the world, or, was being portrayed to be in the world. So I felt like, all right, well, I'm the only one that's like me, and there's no one out there like me that I can look to, that I can find guidance from, that I can be a part of a group that is like me. I think that's a really good way of putting it, is I just think that maybe when I was growing up, I just felt there was never really any sort of representation for myself. And because of that, I felt the representation that I did have was what I was supposed to live up to. And that's where I think maybe I misunderstood what I was perceiving, what I believed that I had to be. It wasn't that I had to do that. It's just that I had just yet to find something that was authentic to me and made me feel like I could belong. And I think maybe if I had that, I could have probably not dealt with so much depression and anxiety. But, as bad as it was, and you know, as much as it hurt me to go through that, and obviously I still deal with a lot of the trauma that I had from back in those days. I still wouldn't trade it in for the world because it did make me a stronger person. And it is a great part of my story, of my lived experience, because I think it's so important for me to be who I am and be so open about sharing it because I do believe it helps people. And I believe there is a place for someone like me who is so honest and open about talking about the bad as well as the good, but talk about the bad that can help because we love to talk about the good, but we shy away from the bad. And that's just not who I am. I think it's important to talk about the ugly side of disability because there is an ugly side to it. There is a dark side to it. There is pain that comes with a disability and chronic illness. And I think me being vocal about that, I'm very hopeful that it can help people.
Speaking of the pain and the ugliness of disabilities, that really can be because of stigma and prejudice that exist within our society. And I know for you, it was very difficult to actually find your first job, and you were 25, but it wasn't for a lack of trying on your part. Can you tell me more about that experience?
Yeah, the other thing that we talk about is stigma and prejudice. And I just think the misconceptions of blindness. I just don't think people know enough about blindness, or if they do, they're very just ignorant of it. Just because a person says, I can't see, doesn't mean they can't see at all. Or just because someone says they're blind doesn't mean they lack vision. There's so much complexities to the language that we use within our community. And I just don't think people have had an education from a young enough age to form actual understanding of visual impairments. So in my town, people were very ignorant and uneducated when it came to blindness and the spectrum of blindness, which I think is most important to bring up, is the spectrum of vision loss. And I tried so hard to get employment because I was like, if I don't get employment now, I'm not going to have anything to put on a resume when I really want to go for a job that I would like to get and actually pursue for a career. Every time I tried to apply for a job, I would be turned away. A lot of times I'd be told I don't have enough experience in customer service, or I need, like nursing experience or whatever. And then a friend that I knew worked there would text me and be like, so did you get the job? And I say, no. They told me I need more customer service experience. They say I don't have any of that at all. And they'd be like, that's weird. I had zero customer service experience when they hired me on the spot. I wonder why you didn't get the job. I think we all know why I didn't get the job. It's because I walked in there with my guide dog. And obviously there's no hiding a disability when you have a guide dog. It's like, oh, obviously there's something wrong with this kid. Let's find a legal reason to say no. That's basically what it felt like going in, trying to find a job in my hometown area. Is I felt like every time I walked through that door with my guide dog, because I wasn't going to hide my disability, because if there was a job I was applying for that I knew I would need accommodations for, I had to let them know. It's like, hey, if I get this job, the only way I can be successful is if you give me this, this, and that. And I think that scares some people, or I just think people just are not comfortable enough with accommodating us because they've never had to do that before. So yeah, I was turned away so many times. And it wasn't until after college when I applied for the nonprofit that actually gave me my guide dog where I was finally able to get employment. And like you said, I got my very first job at 25 years of age. And that was because up until that time, I had always been turned away. It was always because of my disability.
And stories like that happen so much more than people might think. And a lot of the time, too, it can actually be hard to prove that someone is discriminating against you because of your disability.
Mhm.
But you get the feeling. You get the feeling because everything might be going extremely well, especially today when a lot of recruiting and kind of that pre-interview stuff can happen over the phone or happen over Zoom and people aren't aware. And if you haven't disclosed, then you get to the point where you do have to disclose. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you were such an amazing candidate. And then, oh, I'm sorry, we are going to go in a different direction for this role.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? What?
I got plenty of those. Funny enough, and this is a great story. So when I applied for the job with Southeastern Guide Dogs, which is an amazing organization, they're based out of Palmetto, Florida, which is near Bradenton, where I live out of. And I applied with them at the same time I was being fielded by AT&T to work as kind of like a customer service. Like, you call in, it's like, oh, is there blah, blah, blah. Okay, maybe you didn't do this, or maybe you should restart, blah, this and that. And it was going so well. Like they were like, oh yeah, you would make for a great candidate. And I went to the original interview with my guide dog and they were fine. There didn't seem to be any problem. But the second I brought up the fact, so I'm going to need a screen reader, I'll need Zoom text so that I can zoom in, they immediately shut down. They're like, oh, we'll have to see if we can integrate that with our security system. I'm not saying we can't try and do it, but there's a possibility that it might not work with our security, with our inundated system. So we'll have to check with our IT guy. And immediately I just got the feeling, all right, cut off. They don't want me anymore. I've now said something that has basically not want them to have me as an employee anymore. And just thank goodness at that time, I had the feeling in my gut, like, they're going to tell me no, and they're going to give me a legal reason. They're going to find that legal reason because they always do. They always find a legal reason so that they don't get their asses in trouble. Apologies for that.
Oh, no, apologies needed.
But at the same time, Southeastern Guide Dogs was there, and I was just so thankful because here I am. I'm trying everything to get this job of AT&T, going back and forth. And right when I'm just like, oh my God, why can't they just give me the freaking screen reader? Southeastern Guide Dogs just like, hey, do you want to come and do a in-person interview with us for this job? They asked me to come to the interview, and basically I just like, you know what? Forget AT&T. I told them, it's like, hey, you know what? I just don't think this is right for me anymore. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you trying to, work this out and make it possible for me. But I just got this offer that I think is better suited for my skills and that I can be successful at. Let's end here cordially and go our separate ways. And was lucky enough to go to Southeastern Guide Dogs and do the in-person interview. And thank God they left me because they hired me with zero experience.
But when you get that first feeling or inclination that a company is discriminating, even if they haven't officially said that you're not going to be offered the job, it's like an immediate turnoff. And it's like, well, even if you do offer me the job, I don't think I want to work for a company like yours anyway. If you don't, if you're going to put up a fight to give me the accommodations I need, if you're going to make me feel unwelcomed or like a burden because of my disability, even though I am completely capable. So throughout my career, when I was younger, I would disclose like closer to getting the offer letter. Sometimes it would be after I got the offer letter. But nowadays, as I've gotten more mature in my career, I disclose more earlier and earlier on because I'm of the mindset that if I disclose and I get a warm feeling from you, then you're the type of organization I want to work for. And if I don't, then I don't care how much money you're offering me, how great the benefits are. Then guess what? I'm going to tell you at the end of the conversation that I'm not going to be moving forward. So it's definitely a change that I've taken, but you do need to have that confidence and you need to build that self-advocacy skill. And so thankfully we do have laws in place like the ADA, but sometimes again, it can be really hard to prove that there is anything going on. And I also think sometimes people also just aren't fully educated on what is covered through the ADA too.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot that we can teach younger adults, especially the youth of the current generation, when it comes to disclosing a disability during a job interview, because that really is a crucial part. And there are so many make and break moments that come from disclosing, and it can be very scary, maybe even traumatic to disclose. And I just think maybe we should do a better job teaching and putting that into actual education curriculum.
So you get this amazing job for an organization that I feel you were like very passionate about. And a short couple years later, the pandemic hits us. What happens kind of to your situation?
Oh my goodness. Who ever thought something like the pandemic happened? I don't think anybody could have imagined that. I definitely didn't think I would ever live through a pandemic. I mean, I that was the last thing on my bucket list. It really was. And no, I know I don't mean to make light of it, because it is and it still is a terrible time in this current history of ours. Definitely it will be written about in the future history books. You know, this is just my historian coming out in me right now. I thought Southeastern Guide Dogs was my forever job. You know, I was like, here I am, first job ever. What better place to get your first job than at the place that you got your guide dog from? That's awesome. That was so cool for me. And, you know, I worked my way up I started out at the front desk in the student center, and then eventually became a philanthropist, and I was raising money. I for 1 year, in a single fiscal year, I raised $50,000 for the organization. I did that on my own. It was such an amazing feeling of achievement. It's like, here I am doing something that none of the kids back in high school probably thought I could do. They're like, oh, that blind kid Chad's never going to do anything awesome with his life. Well, I sure did. At least I think I did. And you know, I was riding high. I felt so accomplished. I was like, finally, for the first time in my life, I feel like I've got it all figured out. And then the world said no. Pandemic, COVID-19. And that was hard. It wasn't hard because of my vision. It was hard because now I had structured a life. I had gotten into a routine, and now it was gone. And it was gone in a blink of an eye. And now I had to pivot. I had to figure out, okay, what do I do now? Because I didn't have a plan B. I thought my forever job was going to be Southeastern Guide Dogs. So now what do I do? Well, I didn't really have a plan at the time. So in 2021, yeah, I lost my job in 2021. And then for that whole rest of the year, I worked as a janitor in a reemployment office, sanitizing all the equipment and the rooms so that people could still come in. And I look for new employment because obviously people just lost their jobs at a astounding rate. Janitors have an amazing job. I respect them so much, but it's not for me because it does not give me the same sense of self-fulfillment as saying, helping my fellow visually impaired siblings get their guide dog, or raise money for an organization that is then going to match people with guide dogs or veterans with service dogs. you just don't get the same self-fulfillment, especially not myself. So 100% respect janitors in their job. It is definitely a job that has to be done. And for those who do it, I truly do respect them, but it definitely does not give me any sort of fulfillment. So I was on a temporary grant, just trying to pay my bills. So I was just trying to get money to pay my bills. And I want to be careful when I say this because they do great stuff. So I'm not going to say any names, but there were some organizations that could have helped me and do help people with visual impairments find employment, and they would not help me. And that really hurt because here I am, I'm employable. I've worked for about 4 years at a very high functioning job, and I have a good, or at least I thought I had a good skill set. And now I'm not getting help finding new employment. And these organizations that were supposed to help people like myself, they weren't. And that hurt because I thought that, well, who else should help me but them? They've helped me before. Why won't they help me now? So I was kind of left on my own. And I was really just kind of floundering. I didn't know what to do. And basically, I kind of did what I always did when I feel sad and depressed, just started playing video games. And my sister, I'll never forget, I have an older sister that my family kind of adopted and helped raise. She, had some harsh family, situations growing up. So I call her my big sister, Heather. She asked me, it's like, why do you like playing video games when you can't really see to play them? And obviously for me, it's always been because it helps with my mental health. It helps with my emotional health too. It's a good way for me to cope and, let out some of my anger and my sadness. And she said, well, you should really try and find a publication that will let you share your thoughts and opinions on the gaming industry right now as a disabled gamer. So that's what I did. I sat down, I wrote 30 messages. I got 29 no's, but I eventually got one yes, and that yes was from Nintendo Life, a very well-respected publication out of the UK, focuses more so on Nintendo games and products. And they let me publish an article where I gave my thoughts on 6 of the Nintendo's, at that time, best-selling games. And basically reviewed them from a accessibility standpoint and basically judge whether they could be played by a visually impaired gamer or not. And that led me, and I didn't know at the time, but that would lead me to become a podcaster.
"2023, you are a rising podcaster with your own shows. You're a co-host for another show, and you're establishing yourself as a speaker and a disability advocate for the youth. Tell me more about how you got to today, because today your life feels and looks to me to be very different from 2021.
It's so crazy. I never, I had the sense that going all in on my disability was a good idea. And obviously the younger Chad would be like, that's the worst thing you could do. Abort, do not go all in on your disability. Your disability sucks, Chad. But to my younger self, I'd say, you didn't know anything at the time, buddy. I'm sorry. You didn't know. You just didn't know. There's so many things that are still, even as of the last 2 days, that are popping up and that I'm having conversations about. It's such a whirlwind. I just try to keep myself grounded and humble. It's how my parents raised me, so I don't ever think I'm the best. I always think there's someone better than me, that I can be replaced. And it's not to be negative on myself, but I don't ever want to think that I'm the end-all be-all, because obviously that's just not a good mindset to have, especially in the community that I am in and what I'm trying to do. And that's just bring universal accessibility and awareness to as many disability communities as I can. If there's money in it, cool. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the mission. And that is to help my community and the other communities. So that's key. That's key above all else. But basically, to get you off the cliffhanger I left you with, because it's like, oh yeah, the article, and then I didn't, elaborate, kind of gave you a little cliffhanger there. What happened is that someone over at the RNIB, which is the Royal National Institute of Blind People over in UK, they have this cool thing where they do their own radio show called RNIB Connect Radio. And one of their content creators named Paulina, she read my article that I published with Nintendo Life. Again, I have no idea that this article is going to do something big. I'm just like, I'm getting paid to write an article about games. Awesome. That's all I could ask for. Nothing else. I left no way to contact myself, but Paulina, she Sherlock Holmes me down. She went on the internet, basically Google searched my name, if there was any other articles I had published, and she found an article I wrote for Blind New World. And in that article, I mentioned Southeastern Guide Dogs and that I used to work for them. So Paulina reached out and said, hey, I know you used to have a guy named Chad Boughton working for you guys there. I don't know if he's still there with you. Can you please help me get in contact with him? I want to ask him some questions. So I get this email from Southeastern Guide Dogs, and I'm just like, I don't even work for you guys anymore. Why are you bugging me? I'm still mad at you. And not really, but and I was so close to deleting that message. And, think about like what ifs, like what would have happened if I deleted that message? I probably wouldn't be here right now. Honestly, I didn't do it. Thank God I didn't do it. And, Paulina's like, hey, I read your article, and, here's what RNIB does, who we are. We have our Connect Radio. I would like for you to come on and talk to me on the record about your article and, about disability in gaming. And that was my first opportunity to talk on air with an audience that was listening or was going to listen. And it was so amazing. Paulina is amazing. I credit her so much. I will give her flowers for the rest of my life because she truly made me understand that I could broadcast and have a voice and build a community. After we did that first recording, she's like, do you want to do anything else? And I was like, yeah, this was fun. Is there any way that I keep doing this? She's like, yeah, let's have you record this. Let's record this. Let's have you do a Christmas shopping list for video games for the visually impaired community or disabled gamers. And we just kept collaborating. And, just one day kind of off the record, she's just like, you could really just do this on your own. Like this is a legit career. And you have such a good voice, and I never thought I had a good voice. I still don't. But she's like, you have a great voice, and you're super passionate. You love this. You want to help people. I think you could really, put something together on your own and start building community and start talking to people within the community. And I was like, really? Do you think that I could do that? She's like, absolutely. We've worked together on like 5 projects now, Chad. You can do this. I have absolute faith in you. And, I just thought about it, was like, let it just hang in my mind for a little bit. And eventually I was like, you know what? Why not? It's not like I'm not, all I'm doing right now is sitting around playing video games, just trying to find the next path in life for me. Got all the time in the world. Let's just do the podcast. Let's see what comes of it, if anything at all. And wow, it's incredible to see. It's only been a year. March of this year was a year that the podcast has been live, that I've been publishing episodes, and the amount of things that I've got to do. I still pinch myself to this day because it still doesn't feel real. It's just incredible to see what has happened now that I've gone all in on my disability, and I found a way to make my disadvantage into my advantage. Truly, I could never have imagined this, especially not back when I was in college, feeling like this disability is the worst thing in the world. Let's get rid of it. Let's say goodbye to life. it's just so crazy to see what has come of finding pride in my disability. And I guess I never thought that could happen, but I guess things happen for a reason. We all have our journeys and we all go on them for a reason. And I think the bad mixes with the good, and we need to have the bad with the good. I'm just blown away with all the success. I mean, I really can't believe that just this year I've gotten to go to 2 disability conferences as like a key, attendant there. It's just like I never thought I would be traveling for a career. It blows my mind to think the life that I'm living with my disability.
That's incredible. I love that you met Paulina. That's so cool. As a gamer enthusiast yourself, Chad, I mean, this is just such a cool opportunity for you. I'm curious to know, for any people who might be disabled and might enjoy playing games, or for any gaming developers and manufacturers, what are some of the key things to know about games for people who are disabled and the accessibility part?
Some developers may believe that there's not a lot of money to be made in making their games accessible for disabled gamers, and that is just wholly untrue. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's like well over 100 million gamers have some form of disability. Again, I would definitely need to be fact checked on that, but it would astound people to see the true numbers of how many people are gaming with either a visible or invisible disability. And I think the market is still not understanding that if you build it for us, we will buy it from you. And if you do build it for us, we will support you. We will sing your praises, because for some of us, we're at a point where we may feel that we can no longer game, and we feel it's because of our disability, when in reality, it's just that the games have not been made for us. We're not the problem. It's the games. It's the ways that games are developed. And I think these developers need to understand how much it means to us as the disabled gamer to find a game and to find a game company that is willing to make accessibility their number one priority. Companies like Naughty Dog, Insomniac, Playground, Santa Monica, the developer out of there that they just worked on the newest God of War, Ragnarok. These are all companies that are really working hard on their accessibility features. Now, again, there's definitely so much more that can be done, but what they have already done makes gamers like me look at them and go, thank you. I respect you for doing that, because you are making sure that I am included. And we always toss around this word, this phrase, that gaming is for everybody. But is it truly for everybody if we are not building the games from the ground up so that they can be played by everyone, regardless of their disability or their chronic illness? Because if we're not doing that, then gaming is still not yet for everybody. If we want gaming to be for everybody, we truly have to continue to put more resources and research into accessibility features in gaming. And things as simple as audio cues, brightness and color contrast modes, auto aiming. These are all simple things that we've had in gaming for years and years, but they're still so untapped and still so overlooked. And I think sometimes, especially in the current market, we are rushing games too much to meet a deadline. And I understand there are deadlines. There are only so many available resources for making a game. But I think we are rushing the development of games far too much. And I think instead of pushing these games out where they're not even, ready to release, basically they're broken when they release. And we have to pay money for these companies to fix their games when they could have fixed it themselves. I think we need to look more at longer development times, because back in the day, it took 5, heck, even 10 years sometimes to develop a game. But at least when those games released, they worked. And I think, especially when it comes to accessibility features, we got to spend a lot of time ironing out these features, making sure they work, that there are no bugs, that everything in terms of the coding has been inputted properly. Because I mean, there's no worse feeling than being excited about a game that has accessibility features that, or an accessibility feature that you're excited about, and then you boot up that game and it's not working the right way. It just you get a real like, oh, ooh, that's not what I wanted to see. Oh, this is no. Like, for instance, I was so excited about Far Cry 6 because of their narrator. Basically, from the second it starts up, it starts off the game. It's voicing the menus to you, letting you know what you're clicking on. And then I was excited about that because I'm like, oh, awesome, a narrator. That's great. We need more narration in games. And the narrator really didn't work that good. And I was so bummed because I was super excited about that feature. And I was just like, maybe they didn't spend enough time, or maybe they didn't test it enough. But it's just, I think really what could fix that is more resources, more research, and definitely more time put into the development of these games.
So, Chad, my show, as you know, is called Not Your Average Goat, GOAT standing for greatest of all time. It is a sports term because I'm a big American football fan.
Hey,
Yeah, Go
what's your
Ravens.
team? Oh,
Baltimore
good
Ravens.
team, good
Yes.
team.
Yeah, my husband and I are PSL owners, so we have season tickets, which I
Nice.
love. But with that said, everyone I bring on the show, I see as someone being a quote unquote average goat that I think everyone else should know about. And so I love to ask my guest, who or what for you is kind of your goat in life?
I have a lot of goats. That sounds weird saying it like that. I have a lot of goats. Obviously my parents, they're greatest of all time. I mean, they are so amazing. They raised me the best they could. They never really had any of the answers because they didn't have access to any of the resources for a kid losing their vision at such a young age. They really had to figure it out. They had to problem solve, and they did a pretty dang good job, I think. So they're definitely goats to me. I would think I mentioned him before. My friend Ryan Jones. I think he's a goat, because when I first met him, it was very early on in my diagnosis, maybe 1 or 2 years into my diagnosis. And my mom worked for his father. He was a principal in the school district my mom worked in for a number of years. And funny enough, when she went to the job interview, she told her, his name is Mr. Jones, Bob Jones. She's like, well, I didn't really think I should go back to working yet because I just found out my kids have RP. And at the time, they still thought that Ryan had RP. So Mr. Jones was like, no way. Your kids also have retinitis pigmentosa. My son also has retinitis pigmentosa. And it's just kind of one of those wow moments in life. So he introduced his son to us. And it was really cool for me because at that time, okay, what can a blind person do for a career? Like, can they even work? Can they even be a successful business person? And meeting Ryan, who worked at that time for Freedom Scientific, which is now Vispero, he was so crucial for me to meet because it was my first time meeting a blind person that was successful, independent, confident. And he knew all like the technology, he had the jaws and the voiceover. So he was like trying to like really instill in me is like, no, just because you're losing your vision doesn't mean you're broken or you're a failure. There's so many different things in this world that I myself am currently working on with my company to help make it more accessible. And he was just so important with me. I still keep in contact with him to this day. So he was such an important person for me to meet. And I truly believe, like, in terms of like an unsung goat, he's like the super unsung goat. Like, he's the hero that nobody knows, but he's my hero and I know him. And people would be lucky to get to know him too, because he was such an important person in terms of representation for me to find in my life. last but not least, my sister. And the reason that she's a goat is because she, for the longest time, thought that as she was comfortable with her disability identity, that that would be bad. She thought that was a bad thing. She went so long thinking that she couldn't be proud with her disability. And as a brother, I'm an older brother, if only by 14 months. Still, though, I have the big brother mentality. I want the best for my little sister. I want her to be successful. The reason she's a goat, and maybe probably is my goat of like my greatest of all time, is because she eventually was able to find pride in her disability, and she was eventually able to have a positive disability identity. There was no prouder moment for me during my time working for Southeastern Guide Dogs than literally 3 months into my job. I was watching my sister walk around the campus training with her current guide dog, Ava, and then leaving the campus with the keys to her independence and confidence. So for me, she's the true GOAT because she could have given up and she could have never formed a positive disability identity, but she kept working. She found a passion in her life, massage therapy, and she just found her path in life. And as a big brother who loves the little sister, I'm just so happy to see her now and see all the success that she's continuing to have. And it's amazing to be able to live with her and witness it first person. So I think as much as I love my parents, I think little sis is over them.
Little sis, go little sis. I have a bunch of little sisters. I love that story. Chad, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your time and just the insightful conversation and really being willing to be transparent and vulnerable about your experience. I think that there's so many stereotypes and myths and so many assumptions about what living with a disability can look like. And so I think it's super important, as we've talked about so many times throughout this conversation, exposure and representation to be there so that people can understand that what they might think may not actually be true. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. It's been awesome. This has been an amazing time. You do such a great job with your interviews. Definitely, this has been one of the most fun I've had recording. I always get so nervous being the guest, but you do an amazing job. So you yourself are a GOAT.
Thank you so much. That's too kind.
You're very welcome. I mean it.